careers are a tricky
I don't know
thing.
that I ever really had much of a plan for my career.
You work and work and work at a place, and at a certain
I was
point,
always on secret double probation
think,
for something.
hey, I'm going to be here forever, and then you realize
the organization had other plans.
it's certainly not where I expected to be.
I love your idea of the promo cowboy, because that's really essentially what I've become again.
Okay, this edition of Promo Cowboys is not about keeping your job in TV branding, promotion, and marketing until it's time to retire. We all know that doesn't really happen anymore. Instead, we're going to hear about what it takes to stay in the game deep into your career, how to stay relevant and reinvent yourself after you've peaked. This is Barry Fitzsimmons. Welcome to Promo Cowboys. Joining me today is my good friend and colleague Bill Hartnett, who once held the top marketing post at NBC News. Bill and I have traveled the TV promo landscape in greater New York City for more than 20 years. From local stations to basic cable and network news, our paths have crossed and diverged and crossed again, and here we are now. Hey, thanks for joining me, Bill.
How are you? I'm glad to be here.
So, I want to have you tell me just what you're doing now, the status of your career. If you want to include your client names, you're welcome to. You don't have to, but just tell me what you're up to these days.
Well, what I'm doing now. Okay, so I am working at AMC Networks, and I've done stuff for IFC, and AMC. Currently have been at AMC since about April, and did some projects for them, going back almost 3 years now. And I'm basically hanging in an edit room every day.
So you're a creative television writer, producer of on-air promotion and any other stuff? Like, are you doing viral content? Are you doing sales tapes?
I did a project, a couple projects for IFC over the winter and into the spring. I did their upfront last year, which was a whole bunch of sales tapes. Then I did some sales marketing pieces, and then I did a tape for the cable show in May, or what I forgot what it has a new acronym, but yeah, I did their big tape for that. So it's funny because it's not where it's certainly not where I expected to be, but it's very funny because I actually quite like being there.
And the cable show you're talking about is INTX, that used to be NCTA?
INTX, yeah. NCTA, which is now INTX. Exactly. I just couldn't think of it off the top of my head, being, stage fright and stuff.
Wait a second. Stage fright? This from a guy who used to make presentations to the GE board and the president of NBC News? Come on. Folks, just want to let you know that scratching sound you hear on Bill's audio is just a little trouble we had with his microphone. It'll go away in a matter of moments. Back to my conversation with Bill. Now, you were once the top marketing VP at a major TV news outlet. I'd love to hear you tell me a little bit about that.
Well, that's really funny because, again, careers are a tricky thing. I don't know that I ever really had much of a plan for my career. And I know I didn't. As a matter of fact, I don't even feel like I really thought of it as a career, probably till I had been in New York City for a few years. I mostly just wanted to have a job where I could work and I could go do the stuff I wanted. And at a certain point, ambition kicks in, and also adulthood and paying for stuff that's more expensive than a studio apartment and things like that. So, basically wound up at NBC, and you and I were there together. And, I became, I started to run a small group, and then a larger group, and then and ultimately entire group. And the one thing that I can say about it is, I got to do a lot of crazy, really fun things. It was very, very hard. You work and work and work at a place, and at a certain point you think, hey, I'm going to be here forever. And then you realize that the organization had other plans. And it's sort of, it's one of those things that was a blessing and a curse. It was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me leaving there, although it was, certainly challenging at the time. I never stopped working. I never did anything. I stopped reading. I stopped listening to music. I stopped exercising because at a certain point, all I did was work. And which is, I think there are certain points in your life. That's what you get to do. You get to work. You get to work really hard. And you get to work on something that you like and enjoy and you have a vision for. And And then when your services are no longer required, then you got to figure out what to do next. And so, and as you know, I mean, you and I, we kept in touch a lot and worked together a lot over that the 12 years that I was sort of, I guess, on staff at NBC. And it never ever slowed down. I mean, all it ever did was go farther, go faster. And at a certain point, you realize. And I have a fairly big endurance level. I can get through a lot, but at a certain point you realize I can't run any farther if I have to run faster, and if I have to run faster, I can't run any farther.
Okay, so Bill had this experience of an NBC News that was trying to move faster and trying to move into the digital space. I asked him to tell me about how that went.
Broadcast news is a business that's challenged. It is. All of television is challenged and trying to figure out how to evolve into the digital world. So they basically hit everything harder. They want to make a bigger deal out of everything. Everything is an event because they're working very hard to keep people interested in the broadcast platform, which is where all the money is, and it still is. I mean, I think there's plenty of opportunity in digital news for broadcast networks, but I also feel that the broadcasts are where all the money still is. So those have to do well, and I think a marketing team can only do so much, the editorial team can only do so much, but everybody is doing more than they'd ever done. I don't ever feel like it seemed to increase exponentially.
So Bill is at 30 Rock for about 14 years, and I had the opportunity to work alongside him at two very crucial points, those being the beginning of his reign there, and then again at the end, after he'd built his empire, so to speak. I witnessed, from a peculiar perspective, watching you do what you had to do there and what you built. Was really impressive to me, I have to say, especially knowing that you and you had been put in that position, and I'm like, wow, how's he going to do here? This will be interesting, and I'm folding my arms and sort of sitting at, let's watch. And then you and I both know what happened after that. I left the company and sort of went through my own version of that, a smaller version. But you did build something pretty spectacular, and it did seem to me that all you did was work. And I was pretty in awe of your ability to go from being a promo cowboy, a guy who's basically, earning a day rate, doing creative work in the edit room, sitting behind an editor every day, to running an entire team of people. I think there was as many as 40 or maybe 50 people there, and really taking care of all those people, giving them a vision to get behind, leading them. And there's something to that. I don't think that's a skill everybody's born with.
Hey, well, you're not. And one of the things and I look back and I look at, and thank you, really. I mean, it's very, what you're saying is, I forget that. That's easy to forget all the great stuff that you did because, of course, you focus on the colossal mistakes that you make and the things that you do. When you're managing and running, leading a group of people. They all have entirely different expectations. And so trying to move a group of people forward and get them to not only, work hard and deliver great creative, but also to sort of have them grab onto a vision, because that's what you want. I mean, that's what you want with a group of people. You want them to believe in what they're doing, that there's a certain mission to it as opposed to it's shift work. And I think that's a real challenge. And believe me, along the way, there were massive, massive mistakes. And I think it's nice because I forget to be, I appreciate, like I said, I appreciate what you're saying because, you forget like, hey, that's right. I did do some good stuff there. I guess I did, I did last for 12 years on staff. So I guess I probably did something right. But at the same time, it's funny because you talk. I love your idea of the promo cowboy because that's really essentially what I've become again, and it wasn't what I expected to do.
Hey, we'll get back to my conversation with Bill Hartnett in a moment. But first, this Promo Cowboys podcast is brought to you by Bourbon, Beer, and Bar Pretzels, and by the novel Promo Cowboy, a TV industry thriller by yours truly, Barry Fitzsimmons, Available at Amazon.com and your finer bookstores. So, Bill's gone from being a guy in a dark suit to being a guy in a dark edit room. He's returned to the life of a promo cowboy. How is it done? Can it be done? He's about to tell you.
After years of wearing a suit and being in meetings, when I was first producing again, one, I didn't know how to do it anymore. I was terrible at it. I really was. I was terrible when I started. I mean, I still kind of am terrible, but I was terrible when I started doing it again. And I would sit in that edit room, and I was still wearing I wasn't wearing a tie, but I was still wearing like a suit and or a jacket and nice trousers and
polished shoes.
Shoes.
You made sure to brush your teeth that morning.
And I'm sitting there thinking, like, shouldn't I be in a meeting right now? And I mean, it was so weird to go from thinking about 100 things and then focusing on one thing. And to me, honestly, that's been more fun. The ability to not have to think about 100 different things and not have to care about 100 different things. I get to care about the projects I'm working on, which I think is amazing, because then I can focus on them and make them great, as opposed to sort of trying to juggle 100 things and hope that you're doing at least, above average work on all of them.
I fought the Comanches away from your ranches and followed them far out on the frontier.
30 odd people are basically looking at you saying, what are we supposed to do? And you're like, okay, you 4 do this, you 5 do this, you 7 come with me. And like everybody's kind of got their marching orders, and they know what to do. They know what their mission is. They know how to measure success, because the success is based on your saying, okay, good job, move on to the next thing. But you also have to look after the people who you report to and make sure that you're doing enough for them to make them believe in you and to make them keep supporting you.
And this is the part I don't like about bigger jobs, is that you do have to spend a tremendous amount of time appeasing the people above you, and also communicating your work. And there's always that people will say, "Oh, let your work speak for you." And the problem with that is, when you work for people who have dozens of people trying to grab their attention, your work isn't going to speak for you. You have to speak for your work. And that's a harder thing. And it's something, the boss that both you and I worked for, that one of his great skills, and something that I wish I had learned more of, is he was fantastic at selling his vision to the people above him. I think half the time they thought he was full of nonsense, but because he was entertaining and approached it with absolute conviction and passion.
Can we spill his name? Can we go ahead and spill his name? The NBC executive that Bill's referring to, it's none other than Frank Radis, the architect of the NBC agency, at least the East Coast version of the NBC agency, which he actually wanted to call the Five Families. I never asked him to clarify just why.
No, Frank Radis. Yeah, no, he was great with the vision. I mean, he was great, or at least he was great with selling the vision of the day.
Yeah, if you worked for Frank, you certainly didn't have to worry about what am I supposed to do. But I wonder what it was like to be the guy sitting above and looking down at Frank and saying, okay, Frank, what do you got for us? And he just gets the dogs and the ponies out.
Look, honestly, and I've joked with him before, he was like the Wizard of Oz, man. I mean, he was that dude standing behind the curtain that looked, 50 feet tall, but it's like this little dude behind the curtain, like cranking the things as fast as he can, hoping nobody realizes it. But that's a big part of the corporate world, is that you do have to be, in a lot of ways, you do have to be the Wizard of Oz to the people above you. You have to make it look like we're doing this giant big thing that's really important, that's going to make the company money. That's why you have to give us this budget. That's why you need to give us these people. And I think he was excellent at that. I mean, he really was. And I would say that's where I failed, but that was not my strength. My strength was not selling that giant big vision to the people above me. You have to learn how to structure a team so that you can be the Wizard of Oz. You can be the guy that is selling this vision. And even if the vision changes, which it often did, I mean, hourly even, you want to be able to sell that. And that's a tricky thing. And that's something I learned, because after I left NBC, I thought, well, I'll just keep doing exactly what I'm doing. I'll just go do the same thing. I'll go be an SVP someplace else. And again, you run into the same thing where you have to sell a big vision, and a lot of times places are not successful, and places aren't doing well, and it's much harder because the thing is that marketing is a cost center. Unless you're doing ad sales deals, marketing costs a lot of money, and in particularly, even if you're a small cable network, you're still paying the same prices for everything, and you still have to invest the same type of money and vision into the long-term sell. It's and I think that it's even that much harder at other networks unless they just don't care.
Okay, so next, I asked Bill to take me back to the beginning.
Well, I started at KTZZ Television in Seattle, which was a UHF station, and they ran mostly black and white programming, things like Leave It to Beaver, Perry Mason, lots of old movies. Basically, every bad movie made between about 1929 and 1975, they had. No good ones, but it was, so it was basically classic, before everything became a network, before there were the UPNs and the WBs and all, how all the sort of the independent stations became part of networks in the 90s. They were all independents, and we were the lowest rated station in Seattle. I worked there for about a year and a half. I was a promotion assistant, but I taught myself how to edit. I taught myself how to produce. I taught myself how to write. Because I was supposed to help out a producer, but he didn't seem particularly interested in actually getting any work done because we didn't have a boss. And
that's always nice.
And so I went ahead and decided, I'm going to produce my own spots, and so that's what I did. And I learned how to edit, and then I went to another station in Seattle, which is a little higher rated, a little bit better. Had been there forever and ever. And they had a kids show that I used to watch when I was a kid, and I was even on a different kids show there. We had one of those back when they used to do. They'd run Bugs Bunny cartoons, and they'd have in Seattle there was Brakeman Bill and J.P. Patches, and they decided to revive it with the Ranger Charlie show. And they picked the booth announcer and threw him in in a Boy Scout uniform with shorts, and he became Ranger Charlie. And there was a raccoon puppet, and then they bought a gorilla costume and called it Bigfoot, and I was Bigfoot.
So you're a performer as well. How many episodes?
I did it for about a year. We used to do parades, and but we'd basically make up some meaningless skit to do for kids and run some cartoons. We used to do it every day. So I did it for about a year, and that was a lot of fun. Yeah, no, so that's what I did that, and then I worked for a boss at that station that had absolutely no knowledge whatsoever of television, and she was but basically I was always on secret double probation for something, so I decided I'm leaving here, and then the station that I'd worked at before, I went back there and worked for about a year. Sort of running the small kind of being like the senior writer producer or whatever it was. And then I got laid off from there. And I thought, okay, I'm going to move to New York or San Francisco because I wanted to move to a bigger city. I really had no ambition in television beyond I wanted to get a job. So then that's how I wound up at Channel 9. And that's where we met.
Channel 9, old WWOR-TV in lovely Secaucus, New Jersey. It was home to lightning rod luminaries like Morton Downey Jr., Jackie Mason, Joe Franklin, and even Howard Stern for a while. Anyway, it wasn't quite New York, but it was close. So close that on a clear day you could look beyond the Union City hills, and I swear you could see the top of the Empire State and the Chrysler Building.
We did promos for everything from lots and lots of bad movies to Married with Children, Cosby, Baywatch, all that stuff. I don't even remember all the shows that we had.
I remember doing spots for the Richard Bay Show and Jenny Jones.
Oh yeah, Richard Bay Show, Jenny Jones.
Couple of news promos, but not many.
The 10 o'clock news.
We worked with union editors who all they wanted to do was they wanted to either nap or just leave early.
Oh, I remember it well.
And then there was, of course, the art director, who deserves at least to be mentioned.
Ah, come on.
Quickly.
Yeah, no, and see, that's what, again, that's what's funny. And I think sometimes is missing. Those first few jobs were ridiculous, and there were all these ridiculous characters, and
Characters are missing.
yeah,
They are
yeah,
missing.
we don't have those, and Jerry Miller, who I don't even know if he's still alive, but if he is, he would be about 89 now. And yeah, he was what should we call him? Irascible, an irascible art director who really had had no interest in really directing any art whatsoever, but wasn't about to allow anyone to do any of it for him. But yeah, so I mean that's
Yes.
and then I went freelance, and it's funny because when I do freelance is sort of when I feel the most confident and the best about what I'm doing. And I think a lot of that is, you don't have a job to rely on. You have to make the job. You got to go out there every day and you got to find stuff. And as you know, that's hard. That's a real challenge to get out there and, find clients, find work. But I also think it's when I do my best stuff, because I'm motivated by the fact that I own the project. It's what I get to do, and it's what it's sort of how I will succeed with this company is by doing great projects, and then they'll keep having me do more stuff. Whereas I think a lot of times when you have a job, you don't care. You just get it done. It's more about getting it done and moving on to the next thing. Whereas, when you're a freelancer, you're out there, you have to succeed with everything you do, or you won't be invited back.
Yeah. Well, that's where you finally do let the work speak for you instead of your ability to show up at the meeting and say the right thing or
Right.
Okay, so you go freelance again after you leave Channel 9. We didn't really see much of each other until you came back to NBC, or came to NBC, was it, for the first time?
A couple of years later, yeah.
And Bill and I worked together for roughly 3.5 years, doing promos for Dateline NBC. And, we were there during the time where that show really had its heyday and was on the air 5 nights a week, it seemed. And, in fact, topped the ratings a handful of times. And then, of course, you went on to great success at NBC. I went elsewhere and became promo cowboy, as it were. You had 14 great years there, and then you left and you went to Current TV.
Yep. When I first got to Current TV, I think they had a vision. And they had a vision of what they wanted to do and where they wanted to go. And that's why they brought me in.
Hey, if you're unfamiliar with Current TV, it was initially launched in 2005 as a sort of super progressive alternative to other news networks. It was left of MSNBC, it was far left of CNN and the major networks, and it was completely on the opposite side of the news spectrum from Fox News. The venture was headed up by a consortium of investors, including former Vice President Al Gore.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that was great. I got to hang out with Al Gore a couple times, and they had their main office was in San Francisco. They had studios in Los Angeles. They had offices in Los Angeles, and then they had a big office in New York. So it was weird because you had to deal with all these different people to do stuff, and they also, one of the things, they had contracted out their master control. And so at one point, for a news network, and this is when you're in trouble, for a news network, they wanted to schedule promos 2 weeks ahead. Basically, they wanted stuff delivered 48 hours in advance of air. Under emergency only, they could turn something around in 3 hours. Also, they had no footage. That was the other thing. They had no footage library.
It was over roughly 8 years that Current TV had gone from user-generated content to a brief partnership with Yahoo to hosting the likes of Keith Olbermann even. And in late 2011, Bill Hartnett arrived at a Current TV that had clearly suffered from the delusion of believing if you build it, they will come.
They expected that to happen immediately. They expected that people would just come because they were doing it. And it's a tricky thing because I think that you have to build, unfortunately you're in a competitive space where you have to have insanely great shows. You have to have great marketing. You got to spend a ton of money. You got to get out there. You got to have the will to do that. And that may take 6 months or 2 years or 10 years, or it doesn't happen overnight. And I think also they had pinned a lot of their hopes on Keith Olbermann, who cratered there pretty quickly. And I think that as soon as that sort of happened, they kind of gave up on that vision, and shortly after that started to, move towards selling the company. And that was tough because, I kind of went in there uh, having come from a large network with a lot of money and a lot of people. And I started with really nothing. I had a couple of people, there were a couple of freelancers, and I had a team. I was paying somebody out of house to do all the on air work. And it was great because the one thing that was cool about that is I got to do everything. I got to be very hands-on with just about everything that we were doing. Everything social, digital, ad sales, marketing, on air, media plans. Everything was very hands-on because we just didn't really have any people. So I got to do lots of great stuff. But again, there wasn't, Current seemed to change its vision about every year or so. And once they changed their vision, then they swept out a lot of people and then moved on. And that's really what happened. But I think my mistake there is that I took a job because I needed a job, as opposed to trying to find the work that I wanted to do.
But don't you think it seems to me like that's a real luxury, especially for a guy with a family. Both of us have families. To take a job that's the right job and to wait for that job to come along is so hard to do.
Right. Well, and that's like as if I don't have bills to pay. And yeah, I took that job because I needed a job, but it really wasn't. It wasn't what I wanted to do. I had done news long enough. I didn't really want to do that again, and I sort of expected to just kind of leave NBC and then I would just walk right in and do the exact same thing somewhere else. And it wasn't the same. And it wasn't the same. And I got to do a lot of great stuff. I really did. I got to rebrand a network. I got to launch a bunch of shows. And in the end, this is not what they wanted. And all of a sudden they didn't have a job again. It was a small operation and they hired the people they needed for what, or they would hire the people they needed. And if they didn't need that person anymore, they would get rid of them. And it wasn't like, hey, let's adjust people to this new task or this new goal. It was, and if over their history, they went through a lot of different iterations. I was part of one iteration, and once that iteration changed, I was gone.
Hey, I'm going to take a little break from my conversation with Bill Hartnett because now it's time for Getting Fired in America. Humorous and heartbreaking stories of, losing your job. Any job. Even a job like this one from a guy from Tiburon, California who preferred to remain anonymous.
When I was a sophomore at Redwood High School in Marin County, California, I took a job at Bud's Ice Cream Parlor in Mill Valley. The place was managed by a dude who I don't know, I think he was a junior or a senior at Redwood. We may have had a math class together. Anyway, I'm going to call him Paul, okay? So now Paul was sort of a square cat, sort of a jerk, but Paul was cool because Paul had a beautiful purple Olds Cutlass from the late 60s. I forget which year. Paul had tricked it out. He tricked that Cutlass out just right, jacked up on the back, fat tires. It was a muscle car, but a classy, sexy muscle car. The day I started my job at Bud's, there were like 5 other kids starting too. Some from Redwood High School, some from Tam High, and every day it seemed that people behind the counter outnumbered the actual customers. We ate a lot of ice cream, and we had a lot of good laughs, especially when Paul wasn't around. So after 2 weeks of working at Bud's Ice Cream, Paul takes me aside and tells me, hey, it's been great, but you're fired. I was like, why? And he was like, well, we hired too many people. We have to get rid of a couple, and so you're one of them, and you're fired. I remember being hurt, embarrassed, and confused, and super pissed because my mom had just dropped me off for my shift on the way to her own job, and I was a good 5 miles from home. And if Paul was going to fire me, why couldn't he just call me and save me the trouble of actually coming in for my shift, you see? So I was walking out of the ice cream store, and I was just filled with a raging teen angst. And there in the parking lot, I saw it. Paul's purple Cutlass. And I looked around, and I found a rock. I'm not going to say what I wanted to do with that rock, but it wasn't going to be good for the purple Cutlass. And I looked around, and there were people all over the place, you see, and it was sort of a fancy strip mall off 101. And then sure enough, I saw Paul. He was coming out of Bud's ice cream parlor, and he didn't seem to notice me. And I started quickly walking away with the rock still in my hand, and he got in his beautiful purple car and cranked that engine and slowly pulled out of his parking space. I started towards the long road back to my house, the rock still in my hand. I was thinking I might still have a chance for revenge. I could duck in the bushes up ahead and hurl that rock at Paul's cutlass when it went by. So I hit as best as I could, but the bushes didn't offer much cover, you see, and sure enough, Paul turned that cutlass slowly towards me. And I mean, he was going really slow, and my heart was pounding in my chest. And I tried to duck down behind that bush, my hand all sweaty, holding that rock. But Paul clearly saw me, looking pretty foolish, I guess. He pulled to stop right at the bushes I was trying to hide in. And I was sure he knew what I was about to do. And I thought he was going to get out of his car and kick my ass. But instead, he opened the passenger window and he called out to me. "Hey," he said, "you need a ride somewhere?" I was so mad I was about to cry, and I said no. And he said, "Come on, let me drive you home." I think he said it like 3 times. So I finally climbed out of the bushes, keeping the rock in my hand. I got in that beautiful purple cutlass and let Paul drive me home, and he talked the entire way, a good 5 miles. I don't remember a thing he said, but I think it was his idea of a pep talk. And when I got home and I got out of that cutlass, I said thanks, and I think he said no hard feelings. And when he pulled away, I finally dropped the rock and went into the kitchen to get a snack.
Hey, that was really nice. I want to thank our anonymous contributor from Tiburon, California. And I want to invite anyone who's listening to share a story about getting fired in America. Go ahead and reach me on Twitter at PromoCowboy or on Facebook at Barry Fitzsimmons. Now back to my conversation with Bill Hartnett. So here's a question. I asked this of myself, and I'm going to put it bluntly to you. Would you say at this point that you have peaked as a professional?
As a professional, I don't know. I mean, sure. Have I peaked in terms of salary? Yeah, sure, probably. But if I peaked in my life, have I peaked in terms of how happy I am? I don't think so. I remember when I was young, and I would look at guys like me, and I think, man, those guys are old. Those guys are like 100. And as you know, a lot of times you're going to go and you're going to interview with people who are 15 years younger than you, and they're just going to think like, this guy's 100.
I'm only half 100, okay?
And it's not true. It's just the reality of it. And it's like, I totally get it, And
so what do you base your optimism on?
I base my optimism on that I like to get up every day and go do what I do. And I swear I'm like having more fun doing what I'm doing now than I probably have had since back when we were doing Dateline promos and we used to compete. You would cut one day and I'd cut the next day.
Yeah.
And I would go and I'd look at your spot and I'd go, damn it, and then like I'd go in and I'd try to make a better one the next day. And I love that. I mean, that was fun because we totally like this, ongoing friendly competition. And I think that I got better because of working with you.
Right back at you, fella.
I always wanted like, hey man, can I do something better than that? And I think that a lot of people love being in meetings and sitting around talking about stuff and talking about, strategy and innovation and all that kind of nonsense, which yes, look, those are key. Those are great things to be able to talk about. But also, I love making stuff, and I had forgotten that. That's what's weird is I remember thinking like, oh, I don't really want to go produce stuff again. I just thought like, oh, I've kind of passed that point in my career, but then doing it, I love it. It's really fun.
Yeah, nothing like it.
Oh, there was a little kicking man, his name was Simon Slick. He owned a mule with dreamy eyes, oh how that mule could kick. He'd show one eye and shake his tail and greet you with a smile. He'd gently telegraph his leg and raise you half a mile. This mule, he's a kicker.
Okay, so what does a top marketer who was once a top writer-producer, who was once dressed as a gorilla on a kids show, what does that guy take away from the experience of coming full circle, minus the gorilla suit part? What have we learned here about the evolution of TV marketing and promotion?
Most marketing and promotion departments used to be run by creatives. And then at a certain point, probably about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, like somewhere in the early 2000s, I think the MBAs came in and it became much more about marketing. It became much more about brand, and it became, brand pillars. And we need more marketing as opposed to we need more creative. We need more promotion. And so creative kind of became took a back seat for a little while there. But I do think that it's swung around again to where there's so much good stuff on TV right now that you can brand the hell out of something, but if it's not good, people aren't going to watch it. So I think there's a real emphasis on creative, and also really letting great creative, promote your shows, as opposed to great marketing. And I think when you can combine the two is when you have a winner. When you go see a super kick-ass trailer that has 114 shots in 2 minutes, and it's 48 layers of sound. Okay, that can be cool as hell, but a lot of times, when you go see a trailer like that, you go like, what did I just watch? I don't know, it's for some superhero movie. But when you find a moment where people go, wow.
Yeah.
And either that, whether it's, you've created a sense of sadness in them, a sense of need, a sense of longing, a sense of fear, a sense of excitement, then it's cool. But if it's just, well-produced wallpaper, and that, marketing often will dictate well-produced wallpaper. Not always. I think that sometimes, you have to, really, it comes down to great creative ideas. And it doesn't have to be a big idea. It just has to be like, all right, you made me think something, made me feel something.
Yeah. Do I hear a harmonica back there?
Yeah, no, there's 3 kids in the background, all, I think that is the 2-year-old.
Okay.
He's a pretty good harmonica player for a 2-year-old, though.
The harmonica you're hearing now is not Bill's 2-year-old son, but someday, you never know. Do you suppose then you'll go back to a corporate world if the opportunity arises, or do you suppose you will remain a promo cowboy as you finish out your career?
Well, seeing as that I have a 2-year-old, my career is going to need to go on well into my twilight years. I think I would be hesitant to jump at a job, or just any job, honestly, because I think as long as I can keep busy doing what I'm doing, I have fun. It's great. Is that harmonica? Oh, he's playing a xylophone too, dude. He's like a multi-instrumentalist. The 10-year-old and the 2-year-old are like having a little band in the next room. Okay, so honestly, yeah, I'm like, if a great job comes along, sure. But I like where I'm at, and about a year and a half ago, I did jump at a job. I jumped at a job, and it was, initially it was like temp to staff, and I was there for a couple of months, and it didn't work out. I hated it. They hated me. I mean, not they hated me, but it's like
what was it? You don't have to use the name of the company, but you can if you want.
Well, it was a lot of unscripted programming.
Okay.
We'll go there.
Okay.
I don't want to, and again, and they were great people. There was, but again, they had a very different vision of how things should run than I did. And when you walk into somebody else's candy store, they get to decide how stuff runs.
Right.
And I would have wanted to change just about everything. The way they paced it, the way they did it, it wasn't the way that I would envision running a group of people. But at the end, one of the lessons that I learned from that was that I went after the security of a staff job, not after something that I really wanted to do. And I didn't need to do it because I had other work. And so that's why I'd say, look, yeah, I would love a staff job. It's great. But I also would be I'd kind of want it to be something I wanted to do. And also really, really, I'd ask a lot more questions, and I'd try to learn a whole lot more about the operation before, as opposed to just jumping at a job.
So how do you define success now?
Do I get to leave at 6? No, how do I define success? I don't know. It's like the way I look at it is like, look, I've been successful in my life, and I continue to be successful. Just I have 3 great kids. I have someone great to come home to every night. There are definitely more lucrative paths. There are other, but I don't know. I guess success to me is, do I get to see my kids? Do I get to go for a run? Do I get to listen to some music?
Yeah.
And I like what I'm doing. I mean, to me, that's way more successful than like banging my head against the wall at a job I hate.
Hey, this has been a great conversation with Bill Hartnett, and I had one last topic to cover before we called it quits. I asked him what he's doing and what he's using to market himself to his potential client base. Does he have a website? Is he on Vimeo? What?
I have a Vimeo site. That sort of seems to be the standard these days, which again, I don't love that you can't just put everything in a couple, 3 minutes. People, can pick and choose through all your spots. I just feel like it's a lot of effort. I don't really want to spend that much effort. I used to look at a lot of reels, and I loved it when somebody would give me a really concise, here's 6 spots that are awesome. And then I kind of go, okay, great, as opposed to having to pick and choose through a Vimeo site. But Vimeo sort of seems to be the thing.
Are you keeping your stuff open to the public? Or are you password protecting all your pieces? What do you do?
I keep it open. I think I keep my Vimeo open. Honestly,
yeah.
I just set it up maybe 8 months ago. I was just putting it on YouTube for a while. That I was password protecting because I was a little more worried about copyrighted material.
Yeah, that's one of the areas that I guess is a gray area in the industry now.
Look, it's a work that I did, and if you're really going to get a whole lot out of watching an old promo of The Walking Dead, then cool. I made my own. I got my business cards and all that stuff. I got to say, it's funny because I spent so much time and effort on that stuff, and now I'm kind of not really. I guess, I've sort of spent a few months where I just feel kind of happy to do what I'm doing. For right now, I'm kind of happy just working.
Folks, thanks for joining me. This is Barry Fitzsimmons, a.k.a. Promo Cowboy. I'm really excited about this podcast, and I'm interested in your feedback. Reach out to me on Twitter at Promo Cowboy, also on Facebook and LinkedIn at Barry Fitzsimmons. If you've got a good story about getting fired, I hope I'll hear from you. I also want to thank today's guest, Bill Hartnett, formerly of NBC News, Current TV, Channel 9 in Secaucus, and a whole bunch of other places. Bill embodies the finest qualities in a promo cowboy, and he works for a very reasonable rate. Reach him on all the usual social channels. While I'm at it, I'd like to thank freesound.org for all the great music heard on this Promo Cowboys podcast, notwithstanding Bill Hartnett's kids for providing their own background music and sound effects. I'd also like to shout out to my support team, Jared Mianero, Charles Berlepsch, and Zach Trinka. Thanks for your help and support, guys. Promo Cowboys is a Steve production. Steve is a division of Igloo Media, LLC. This podcast was produced by yours truly, Barry Fitzsimmons, and brought to you by the novel Promo Cowboy, available at Amazon and your finer bookstores. Thanks again for joining us. As Promo Cowboy says, I'll be back by and by. Take us out.